Welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD News. I'm your host, Melina Weisskopf, filling in for Steve Lance tonight. Biden is in Mexico today following a controversial trip to the southern border, what he saw on his visit, and what he might have missed. NTD's Iris Tao has more.
For the first time in 9 years, a U.S. president in Mexico. Biden's in Mexico City today meeting with leaders of Mexico and Canada. And the meeting comes as Biden's facing backlash over his first trip to the U.S. southern border. Stopping for about 4 hours in El Paso this Sunday, Biden visited a port of entry, a migrant services center, and part of the border wall. But Republicans are calling it a photo op, as Biden didn't actually encounter any illegal immigrants or go to any of the areas where they've been camped out for weeks. The White House told reporters that it was coincidental that there just happened to be no illegal immigrants at the service center when Biden visited. Meanwhile, videos showing camps being cleared out days before Biden's visit. Texas Governor Greg Abbott greeted Biden on Sunday by handing him a letter, reading in part, "Your visit is $20 billion too little and 2 years too late." Meanwhile, some Democrats and immigration advocates are accusing Biden of implementing inhumane policies by expanding Title 42. The White House today defended Biden's trip, saying he's committed to treating every migrant as a human being, and that the trip, quote, helped him form a more vivid picture of what the administration has done and needs to do. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
And Congress returned today for another round of voting, this time over the rules package that governs how the House does its business. Here's what we know about the new rules package and how it could impact the slim Republican majority over the next 2 years. NTD's Arlene Richards reports.
Kevin McCarthy.
After 15 rounds of contentious voting and multiple concessions, new House Speaker Kevin McCarthy holds the gavel, but some say the compromises have weakened his power and handed it over to a small group of Republicans. Tonight, the House votes on a rules package that's quite different from the routine ones voted on in the past. A key concession in the package allows any one member to call a vote to remove the Speaker. If this vote is called, McCarthy would need a majority of 218 votes to remain as House Speaker.
He is going to see multiple pressures to be able to compromise. He's got this immense pressure of what is called the rhinos, the Republican in name only, the ones who will oppose much of what is being done by the conservatives.
He said at the same time, McCarthy is being strongly held to make good on his promises to conservatives. Before the vote, Republican members of Congress gave opinions on the new rules package.
Chip and I agree that the rules package had to change, and we have been working to change it.
I think one thing that I'm not on board with is the idea that, you have to guarantee them X number of slots on the Appropriations Committee or the Rules Committee.
This agreement, if it comes to fruition, will be very good for the country.
Has McCarthy given up too much power? What can we expect from this Republican House?
You can expect them taking a look at the use of the federal government to basically put pressure on Twitter and Facebook and Google and Instagram and all the different factions, types of social media. You can see that what's going to happen is the FBI, the Department of Justice, the CIA, all these different bureaus, they're going to be having investigations.
Congratulations. You are now
Arlene Richards, NTD News.
A tweet from Elon Musk has gotten the attention of the federal government's top auto safety agency. Tesla owners could soon be able to disable a reminder to keep their hands on the steering wheel. It's only for drivers with more than 10,000 miles on the vehicle's autopilot system. A blogger first tweeted about the update, which was later confirmed by Musk, who responded, quote, "Agreed, update coming in January." This got the attention of the federal government. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration says it's in contact with Tesla about that tweet. It comes amid the agency's investigation of Tesla's autopilot system. Multiple crashes have been reported where the cars hit first responder vehicles while in self-drive mode. Do tech companies apply content moderation requirements equally? It depends on who you ask, but one former Facebook employee tells NTD that he saw a political bias firsthand. NTD's Steve Lance spoke with a former Facebook content moderator who describes the double standards that Facebook uses when dealing with political content. Here's that discussion.
Ryan Hartwig, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Steve.
Ryan, you're quite familiar with the way big tech works. If you could just give us a little bit of a background to your experience.
Yeah, so I was subcontracted by Facebook as a content moderator. So from 2018 to 2020, I worked for Cognizant, and we had a contract with Facebook for that content moderation. As you know, after 2016, after Trump won, Facebook greatly expanded their content moderation in the United States. So they spend billions of dollars on it each year. So I was a part of that. So if someone reported a comment or a post or a photo, I was the one that had to review that and determine if it violated Facebook's guidelines.
And you actually wrote a book about your experience there. What are some of the highlights?
Yeah, so my book that published last year, Behind the Mask of Facebook, is a 300-page book with evidence chock full of examples of how Facebook has a double standard when it comes to treating political ideologies. So they censor and target conservatives. For example, they made exceptions to allow attacks against straight white males as filth. So that's allowed. That's no longer hate speech because Facebook made an exception. Or when Don Lemon said white males are terror threats, they made an exception for that. And they also just, anytime Trump gave a speech, for example, even Trump's State of the Union speech, Facebook told us to look for hate speech coming from him speaking. So those are a few examples, but not only that, but how they influence in elections and how they influence elections in the U.S. and throughout the world.
We're seeing with these drops of the Twitter files that there's close links between the FBI and Twitter. Would you be surprised if there were a similar relationship between Facebook and other big tech companies?
I wouldn't be surprised at all. The Twitter files seem to actually mirror what I have in my book, Behind the Mask of Facebook. Just how with the examples of censorship and just the blatant abuse of their powers. For example, Eric Ciamarella was the Ukraine whistleblower that kind of started that whole impeachment proceeding against Trump with his call with the Ukraine president. Facebook's stance on that whistleblower was to delete any mention of his name. And supposedly he was law enforcement, but he's not. He was NSA. So the fact that Facebook took that action to not allow discussion of this individual would indicate that there's most likely government influence, or the government's probably most likely directing Facebook. I didn't have concrete evidence of that, but everything indicates that was happening.
Speaking of the government, this is most likely going to cause a political storm in Washington, D.C. When it comes to Section 230, do you think that this is going to raise that issue?
It is. So what it is the non-delegation doctrine. So Congress should be making the laws, not the agencies. We saw this in the Supreme Court case earlier this year with the EPA, where the Supreme Court basically said, hey, EPA, you're making up the rules yourself. You need to let Congress make the rules. So the same thing is happening with Facebook and big tech. They're basically acting as government agencies. Congress gave them that authority to restrict speech. The main takeaway from Section 230 is that it's been misinterpreted. So there's two parts to the law. There's Section 230C1 and C2. The Ninth Circuit Court has misinterpreted and used Section 230C1 to give those protections to big tech. And they're not using C2 as they should. C2 has the Good Samaritan provision. So the reason they can do whatever they want is we're not applying the law as it should be, and we're not applying the Good Samaritan provision.
Is it also a case of the law not evolving with the technology? Because the law was written before the concept of, say, Facebook was even there.
That's part of it. I mean, if you look at the history of our country.
But you think it could still be solved with the proper interpretation?
I think it would be solved with the proper interpretation. So there's people who call for abolishing it completely. I don't think that's the correct approach, because if we were to rewrite it now with how many lobbyists we have, it would be influenced toward Facebook. So I think it can be interpreted. It can be interpreted correctly and fixed at the Supreme Court.
Ryan Hartwig, thank you so much.
Thank you.
South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem says she and her immediate family are at a very high risk of identity theft. This after the House January 6 committee made the family's Social Security numbers public. The committee published the information as part of the White House's visitor logs. The logs became exhibits during the committee's hearings. The Social Security numbers were publicly available for days before being removed from the website. Governor Noem, her husband, her 3 children, and her son-in-law are all impacted. Noem's attorney described this as a critical breach of confidential data. Her attorney also said this is a violation of federal privacy law. It's reported that nearly 2,000 Social Security numbers were leaked. They were all associated with visitors to the White House in December of 2020. Others whose information was exposed are 3 members of former President Trump's cabinet and Texas Governor Greg Abbott.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.